Start and welcome to today's Scottish Police Authority meeting held here in Merchants House in Glasgow. I have apologies from board member Mary Pitt-Caithley. Are there any other apologies?
No member apologies.
Thank you very much. Before we go on, I'd just like to welcome Tina Ewell to her last board meeting as an observer of the Police Authority. Tina is a very senior member of Her Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary in Scotland and has been guiding us through inspections as the authority both of ourselves and of policing. So thank you, Tina, for all your work, and very nice to see you here in your final meeting. I think you're retiring in September. With that, can I move on to our declarations of interest? It's a requirement, as you all know, of our code of practice to declare any interest of matters on the agenda. Chris Cregan has already indicated to me he has an interest, and I wonder if you could advise what that is, Chris.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I was a member and vice chair of the Independent Review Group, which is referred to both in the Oversight Board report from Tom Halpin and the Chief Constable's report.
Thank you for that. Put on the record. Are there any other declarations of interest? Thank you. Are there any? Sorry.
There may be, just to note that I'm chair of Ayrshire College, and it may be that there'll be discussion with Fiona Douglas in an aspect of the forensics report.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, that's us. Thank you. Can I confirm that there are no other matters of business the members want to raise apart from those on the agenda? Thank you very much. And in accordance with our standing orders, can I ask members to confirm your content to take the following item in private today, which is item 9, which is a verbal update on pay and reward. Okay, I got consent for that. The minute of our previous meeting held on the 27th of June, do I have any comment before I ask you for your approval? I haven't had any so far. Okay, I don't see anybody wanting to make any comments, so I invite members to approve the draft minute. Thank you, that formal minute. My final item at this part is decisions taken since the last full authority meeting on that 27th of June, and I can confirm that no decisions have been taken via correspondence since that date. Great. Okay, so I move on to the item 3, which is my chair's report. As always, I'll take that as read. Can I ask any member who's got any questions they'd like to ask me about my report? Pauline.
Thank you, Chair. I was really heartened to read about the mental health distress service in NHS Lanarkshire, benefiting individuals, police officers' time and A&E department time. This is also covered in the Chief Constable's report. I wonder if you're able to share your impression of what the key enablers have been for that, and perhaps others are able to explain what arrangements are being made to share the learning and that approach across other parts of the country. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll start off and invite the Chief Constable to nominate herself or her team to talk about the replication of that. Very interested to read, to actually visit it, and thank you for all that made that possible, and to meet the divisional commander and the officer who actually led the whole programme. Just as way of background, this board has made policing response to mental health distress a priority for 2.5 years now. And we're starting to see some significant change, both strategically within the C3 space, where there is already triage, and then these experiences and at local level. I was hugely impressed by the community triage system in Lanarkshire, hugely impressed by the people involved who made it happen. If you're asking for enablers, it's people willing to work together across boundaries of services, and people having a focus not on their budgets. It had an impact on their budget and time, but on people. The real focus here is how can we help people in distress get the best possible service? And it is quite clear, we all know this, a police officer attending is important on occasion, but is not the service that's required. And what's been happening in policing over too long, and I spoke about this to David Threadgold some time ago, and we agree, is that police officers who are having to stay with people who are vulnerable and in distress, often in A&E, actually is an opportunity cost for all of policing. And what this project in Lanarkshire showed, a very significant fall in the number of people in distress having to go to A&E. They could have community triage. They could be seen over the directly within an hour, rather than hours and hours in community triage. And the opportunity costs that were saved allowed, I think it was 20,000 more hours of policing to be delivered in Lanarkshire over the period of the pilot. Now, I have said that, I've always said in my policy world, you don't want to transfer projects wholesale. You want to transfer the learning. So my comments on this have been in public. What can we learn, and how can we transfer that learning to other divisions? So if I can hand over to you, Chief Constable, within the context of a very good national service of triage, I think, which you've implemented, this is now a local system, and Pauline's question is it possible to see this implemented more widely? Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning. If I can, Chair, I'll make some broader points and then to the specifics. I know, Chair, that officers and staff were hugely grateful for your support and the interest that you showed in and we agree that's a fantastic example of how the development of local relationships and arrangements can provide better care and support for people who are suffering from poor mental health and at the same time reducing officer attendance at A&E departments. And we are very focused around how we scale up projects, programs like this. You know, previously I've talked about the establishment of a mental health task force to coordinate and drive this work, and this is where the scaling up across the country comes. And so that we can take the good practice in Lanarkshire and other areas, and we've spoken previously about two similar arrangements in the Dundee and Perth area. I know, Chair, you participated in media interviews, and that was hugely encouraging that people were able to see all partners coming together, police, NHS in Lanarkshire and Scottish Government to bring about this significant step change. And part of the work of the Mental Health Task Force is, together with Scottish Government and other partners, to develop an index which consolidates up-to-date contact arrangements for mental health services which officers can access in all areas across the country from their mobile devices. And of course, this is only one part of what must be in a joined-up approach between policing, health colleagues, local authorities, and importantly, the third sector, who play an really important part. So I'm really grateful for the work in Lanarkshire and for the authorities' support. Our role now and our task now is the scaling up, the promulgation of that good practice. We saw the triage in Lanarkshire during 2023 dealt with 2,000 cases, and we estimate reduced officer attendance by 80%. So that is significant. And now we need to work our way through with other partners at other areas and develop what works at a local area, but at the same time with some principles in relation to a shared endeavour in relation to this, and also to be able to demonstrate that investing money in that preventative space, in that intervention space, prevents acute episodes which have impact on all services, whether that's policing, NHS, local authority, or other agencies working at a local level. So we're really encouraged by it. Matt Payton is the Chief Superintendent who leads the task force, and I'll be able to, and we'll look forward to bringing back into this forum in due course the progress that we've made. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any further questions? I'm hoping that what will emerge here is a very clear Scottish approach to calls for service for people in mental health distress. I can see that very clearly emerging, where we are balancing our well-being duty which is almost unique in policing across the UK. We have this duty in policing to address the well-being of individuals and communities, along with the efficiency and effectiveness of policing that the Chief Constable and I talk about quite frequently. And at the last meeting of the board, she was talking about this issue taking up around about 600 police officers per year's time across. So this emerging picture of a sensitive, service-focused approach to those with mental health distress, while still guaranteeing, if required, officers will attend. Because my view is this, that the number of calls for services that Police Scotland receive is an indication of public trust in policing. That's 3 million calls a year. And often the caller doesn't know what the issue is, and a police officer can attend and use their discretion to direct services from somewhere else, find an interim solution. This finds a structure to some of those solutions. Again, I emphasize service-based, looking at the individual. So I'm hoping in some time there'll be this Scottish model of how we address this universal issue across the UK of increasing mental health distress. I see Fiona has her hand. Thank you, Fiona.
I think what struck me, I was on the visit with you, Chair, and thank you very much for inviting me along. I think what struck me was by putting the person at the centre of the decision making, then everyone benefited. So clearly the person who was in distress and their family and their loved ones got a much more effective service. The policing, the police officers, I was struck by the increased education and training that had been made available to them, so they were more confident in carrying out their job, which they could take right across whatever they're doing. And the mental health service also had a more effective service and intervention. So I think what struck me is that everyone was benefiting from this, primarily the citizen, but also Police Scotland and NHS Lanarkshire. And for me, the proof of concept, we now know it can work, and actually everyone benefits. It's not about people bailing out and not doing a job. It's everyone benefits, everyone gets that improved service and improved outcomes, and I was incredibly encouraged.
Chief Constable.
Thank you. If I can just add one more point, that we should recognise the leadership shown by the operations manager in Lanarkshire NHS who you met, and it's only with that leadership across all the partners that we were able to bring about these solutions. Thank you.
Absolutely, very impressed with all the partners, the partnership work and the local leadership there. As I said initially to Pauline, the key driver here was people within the system working across boundaries in a respectful way. Very impressed by that, and the results speak for themselves. I have an indication of a question from Alistair Hay. Alistair?
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you for your report. This is, again, something that's referred to in the Chief Constable's report as well, in its relation to the launch of the digital evidence sharing capability. I really welcome this. It seems something that's really positive and involves partners across the justice sector, and it also mentions it's the groundwork to enable future digital progress within the service, including the use of body-worn video. I wondered at the launch, did you get insights into the opportunities that this offers? Did you get insights into how the learning is being embedded within Police Scotland, and what does it mean for frontline police officers and partners across the justice sector?
Again, I'm going to hand over to the Chief Constable for some of this. I think she should be able to explain to us some of the detail. But I was very impressed, Alistair, by my visit to Stirling to hear. I have been involved in this through the officers of the SPA for quite a long time. There are some complexities about the law around the cloud, but those are quite secondary, in my view, to the benefits this is going to achieve. And the clear benefit is an improved criminal justice system, a system which has two impacts on policing. One is police officers, and this has been rehearsed at this board, are called to court, and then there's a guilty plea at the last minute, and they have lost holidays, rest days, and they have had to spend their time in court. The desk will increase early guilty pleas. The evidence will come earlier to prosecution and defence, and that the evidence, again, from the pilot is that's happening. So officers don't have to be called to court and then not used. That will be a saving. Intrinsically, the civil justice system and early guilty plea is what you require, so the whole panoply of the court system can deal with those disputed claims. That's another benefit. The third benefit is just holding, this is just a simple matter, which people probably expect to happen anyway in this day and age, but it hasn't yet. Hold evidence in digital form and move it around. You'd be surprised how often evidence can get lost or mislaid. I'm not saying please do this, but it's a complex system of the physical nature, and it'll reduce the requirement to store data. And that's linked very closely to the development of body-worn video, because this is the vehicle by which body-worn video will be stored, a degree of editing, and transferred both for investigatory purposes and also for prosecution and defense purposes as well. And in terms of body-worn video, you would have seen the use of body-worn video made to have early and quick prosecutions in the disturbances down south, very quickly used. So those are the benefits that we see. There's a whole range of technical benefits in here. I would say, before I hand over to the Chief Constable, it is remarkable how this has gone through. This is a highly complex area of technology to join up, and we tend to accept it when it goes well and then get rather irritated when it doesn't go well. Well done to those involved in DESK. Very complicated, and I was very pleased to see how it worked. Chief Constable.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. I'll make some comments in response to that, and then DCC Connors will pick up some specifics in relation to rollout. So key to criminal justice reform, and the agility and the ability for justice to be delivered in a timely manner is key, and it's what everybody in the justice system wants, and DESK is one part of that in relation to moving digital material and key pieces of evidence around the system across a country. And I'm confident now that we have piloted DESK, and now we continue the rollout, and that the infrastructure and the momentum is there, and that we will see the continued rollout deriving similar benefits, but also, there will be a pace to it. Our officers have welcomed this. Many of our frontline officers are both young in service and young in age, and of course they would be used to moving material in a digital format. And what it enables us to do, and other partners, both the Crown and the judiciary, and we've seen this in Dundee, is take that evidence in a timely fashion, and then with the right leadership within the courts. And I'm very grateful to judicial colleagues in Dundee for the way in which they've driven behaviour change and demonstrated leadership in those courts in order to derive the maximum benefits from the technology, because the technology is only one part, and it needs everybody to come together around it to derive, like I say, the efficiency and effectiveness and the early guilty pleas. So it's an example of really good joined up public sector reform, and I'm confident that we will continue to derive all of those benefits moving forward, both in the rollout of DESK and in relation to body-worn video. And Jane will pick up some of the further detail around that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you, Chief Constable. So, yeah, as has been said, so DESK is the digital evidence sharing capability system that is being rolled out. Early indications are really positive around the benefits for policing, but as we've said, it's not just about policing. The wider criminal justice system with victims and witnesses, absolutely key to that. There is some anecdotal evidence, because this is going through formal evaluation, that a process that might have taken 5 hours can now be done in 10 minutes. The early indicators are really, really important. In the Dundee pilot, 20,000 pieces of evidence were handled through DESK. Otherwise, that would have had to either have been downloaded onto disks and moved around manually. So it's really obvious the benefits for all of that. We spend about 3.4 million on overtime in courts on citations. Having the DESK system means that we can share that evidence digitally, We get more effective investigation, informed case marking and faster resolution, exactly as you've said, Chair. All of that is really important. I think as part of the wider sharing around digital evidence is the improvement in investigation and the rollout of body-worn video, which is something that the Chief Constable has been very clear about since coming in October 2023. We know that body-worn video is essential. It de-escalates incidents, it improves public trust, it reduces complaints, and it supports our officers and staff, and it really benefits the criminal justice system. In June, we appointed the supplier for body-worn video, a major step forward, and progress continues to be driven at pace to ensure that we can upgrade the network. And this is why it follows the desk system, because upgrading the network to enable desk means that we are able to follow that rollout with the body-worn video system. The desk and body-worn video teams work together, as do the suppliers, and they're complementary systems to ensure that body-worn video can effectively be shared through the criminal justice system and the benefits are maximised. We expect the devices to be deployed and active in spring 2025 for the first tranche of over 10,000 officers and staff, and then they will be equipped over the first 12 months, and then the coordinated following sequencing rollout, as we've talked about, with its links to desk. It is a very complex programme of work, but it is progressing at pace, and we've put a lot of focus on it, and it will revolutionise the way that we capture evidence, we support officers and staff, we support victims and witnesses, and we feed into that wider criminal justice reform that is so essential for creating capacity for our officers and staff and justice for victims. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Alison?
Yeah, thank you very much for your responses, Chair, and from the Chief Constable and the Deputy Chief Constable. I wanted to highlight this because I think, as has come out, the significance of it cannot be overstated. And I would add my own words of congratulations to the team that have been involved in this, and I look forward to the potential benefits being maximised in the future.
Thank you very much. It is important to just emphasise that public service reform angle in here and the partnership, in many ways similar to my answer to Pauline's question. Team Scotland has been working very well on this. The Scottish Government provided finance, structure. The Crown, the courts, the police authority provided assurance in terms of the public interest on this one. And the evidence that the Deputy Chief Constable then showed is so positive about what the benefits are for the early resolution and the use of police officer time in courts. And again, the opportunity cost of that will release police officers back to the direction of the Chief Constable to apply to her priorities of policing. So I do like both aspects of that partnership arrangement. It is the future, and we cannot develop good public services without this clear partnership. Are there any other questions for my... Well, before we move on, I want to say this, is that my 4-year term as chair of the Scottish Police Authority ends on the 31st of January 2025. And once I've completed my term, I will be handing over to a new chair to lead the board. I was offered a 4-year extension by the Cabinet Secretary earlier this year, and I took that offer as a clear vote of confidence from someone I have the very highest regard for in our work as an authority, both advocating for and holding Police Scotland to account. However, I decided not to accept. If I had, I would have been nearer 80 than 70 by the time I finished my second term. I have, of course, informed the Cabinet Secretary of my decision, and the Chief Constable, and the Chief Executive, and I've informed the board yesterday. In my view, 2025 is the right time for a new chair to work with the board to build on our shared agenda of continuous improvement, financial prudence, and delivery of the second phase of strategic police and forensic services reform. The Scottish Government will launch a recruitment process in late September with a view to announcing the next chair in the new year. Having said that, I still have 5 months to serve, and I look forward to those months very much, with us all working together at the same high levels of mutual commitment, respect, good humour, and optimism. Thank you very much.
Chair, if I may, you've made it very clear about your commitment to go full steam ahead until January, but on behalf of the board, can I just thank you for your very wise counsel. You've navigated the authority through some choppy waters. I think your wisdom and your strategic vision have benefited both the authority and Police Scotland. We're very, very grateful to all that you've done. Disappointed that you're going, but very grateful for all that you've done, and there will be plenty of time to thank you further and to mark your contribution to this incredibly important role. So thank you very much on behalf of the board.
Thank you, Fiona, very much. Really appreciate it. Lots of business to get. Sorry, the Chief Constable. Sorry.
Just to add to Fiona McQueen's thanks, Martin, and there will be opportunities for us to have further time to thank you for your commitment to the authority, and we as a team look forward to the next 5 months where we'll continue to move forward at pace, and will no doubt miss your wise counsel and your leadership, but look forward to making progress in those short 5 months. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Really, really appreciate that. And as I said, I do look forward to the next 5 months with the same, working with you all and your team, Chief Constable. Okay, can I now move on to the committee chair's report? I'm going to go through them one by one. The Police Negotiation Board for Scotland is chaired by Fiona McQueen. Fiona?
Thanks, Chair. I'll take my report as read, but essentially both the Pay Negotiating Board and the Scottish Consultative Police Forum have been trying to raise our heads and look more into a more strategic approach. So as it's mentioned in the report, part of the Fair Work Assessment has meant that we've wanted to go forwards in partnership with Police Scotland, Scottish Government, but also with our federated statutory staff associations to have an independent assessment, both on wage growth, but also on overall terms and conditions. So we look forward to that, to have an evidence base about how we can go forwards to take that on. There's clearly been a pay claim notified, and that is an ongoing negotiation. The SCPF, I think, is a very good forum for us to be able to have a conversation in a more relaxed environment where we can develop shared understanding of how we can move forwards for the benefits of officers within Police Scotland. And our new chair has brought a slightly different approach and a different energy, and I'm confident that that will go from success to success.
Thank you very much. Any questions at all? The next one is the revised model of policing oversight group, which I chair. We had our meeting yesterday, and so there is no note of it, and I will wait until that happens for our next meeting. But I would say what we set the task to Police Scotland in terms of this is we would like a vision, we wanted a roadmap, and we wanted measurable change in the first year. And what we had yesterday, there was a complete unanimous agreement that the oversight group was very pleased with the progress that has been made. We had a very clear presentation around all of those issues, and we're going to come back to those at our next board meeting, and the Chief Executive and the Deputy Chief Constable will work together about how to present this early phase in our September board. But I must say, and I commend the Deputy Chief Constable for putting together with her team, and we had a large team meeting yesterday, a very difficult task, which maybe 3 months ago I was slightly more concerned than I am, well, much more concerned than I am. So well done, Deputy Chief Constable, for that. Quite an extraordinary achievement. The second phase of public service reform, which this is, should not go unrecognised. The first phase is under-recognised by the extraordinary merger and the efficiencies created in the first years, with all the challenges that happened. And the second phase is to be really commended, and the enthusiasm with which it is being addressed. The board as a whole will see the events of this come at our September meeting, and what I've always said, in terms of my experience, these reforms are not big bang. They are 3 to 5 years. But what matters is early deliberation. All failures in public service reform come from a lack of deliberation. So I'm very encouraged by the deliberation in here and the clarity with which it was presented yesterday. I don't know if you would like to say anything on this term, Deputy Chief Constable, as you led that programme.
Thank you. It has been, as I said yesterday, a really complex, difficult task to bring together all of the different aspects of change within Police Scotland, business as usual within Police Scotland, but it was an extremely useful exercise to bring that together to be able to bring forward a single direction that will be discussed in September. And I'm grateful for the teams within Police Scotland and within the SPA that supported us through that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions on that? Legal Committee, Caroline Stewart.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, the Legal Committee met 2 weeks ago, and I'll take the paper as read, but two key things I'd like to highlight. One was we reviewed the use of NDAs at our last meeting, and the committee was assured that while the default position is not to use NDAs, where they are used, their use is appropriate. And the second one is our priorities for the year ahead. And the priorities are around enhanced kind of oversight, a full view of the pipeline of legal claims, and more importantly, any costs that are associated with that, so full view of that. And also organisational learning, that will be lessons learned, if there are any, to be taken forward. And to that end, we have invited colleagues from Police Scotland's finance and either executive or people to attend these meetings going forward. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Caroline. Any questions? Thank you for that. Forensic Services Committee, Paul Eadie. Paul.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair. Good morning, everyone. Yes, I would say very good and constructive committee meeting. First up, I'd say we had a briefing note from the Director on nitrazines, which is a new and emerging area of interest for us. And there is a briefing note later on in the agenda, so I'll hold off on that until we get to that. We had a good report on forensics performance, which is generally across the board reasonably good and delivering on most things. Still some concern about the firearms section, but that's being addressed. And there's no risks there for us in terms of court dates. Drug driving, the in-house performance is good. We had reported an 80% compliance rate in June for the outsourcing, the contractual compliance, and there is a commitment to have that to 100% by the end of July, but there aren't stats yet available on that, so we'll keep posted on that. And lastly, digital forensics. This is something that Police Scotland are doing, but forensics, they're using, I think, forensics process and premises, I think, and it's the progress towards ISO 17025, and we were advised that that has been delayed. There's not any risks with court dates or anything else with ISO accreditation. It's been delayed, and that is disappointing, and I think that's because of the resources within Police Scotland. So it's just to note the disappointment in that.
Thank you, Paul. Any questions? Policing Together Oversight Group is chaired by Tom Halpin. Tom.
Thank you. Good morning. Our report, the substantial item in our last meeting was we received the final report of the Independent Review Group. I'd just like to express my gratitude to that group, particularly the Chair, Rob Niffler, and the Vice Chair, Chris Cregan, who's declared his interest today and has since joined the board. I can confirm that board is published this morning on the internet site of Police Scotland and is available as a public document. It was a significant meeting. We received that report, and it also coincides with a number of developments. The leadership being reinforced in terms of the consolidation of the division, Policing Together division, and what was previously the Public Partnerships and Community Wellbeing division, demonstrating the alignment of resources to this important agenda. It's also the appointment of a dedicated chief officer, an assistant chief constable, leading that as well. And there was a number of, there's work ongoing for a refreshed vision for what this means in terms of Police Scotland. And obviously the learning from the IRG report is key to that. The one area which has been identified is the importance of middle management in delivering cultural change, and I'm encouraged to see how that is very much a core part of your Leadership Matters programme of learning and development within Police Scotland. So there's much to report there, but the significant point is the fact that the final report of the Independent Review Group has been received and is publicly available.
Thank you very much, Tom. Before I bring in the Chief Constable, any board members, any comments? Chief Constable.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to add my thanks to the Independent Review Group for their report. Very insightful and timely in the sense of as we embarked on a huge programme of work around becoming anti-racist and a fair and equitable organisation, it's always useful to have external scrutiny and an opportunity to reflect on what we've done well and areas that we need to progress and improve on. And Mr. Halpin's highlighted some of the positives. One of the pieces that struck me, and I'm grateful to the group for this, is a drive around taking our vision and our direction and really focusing on impact and outcomes and how we are going to demonstrate to you and to our workforce and broader communities that we have really made a real difference in this space. So grateful for the report, grateful for all the work, and we'll use it as a vehicle to drive forward in this space and moving forward, and grateful to Mr. Halpin for his continued contribution in relation to policing together. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And as Tom mentioned, the IRG was chaired by Robin Ifler. Just add my real thanks to Robin, somebody who I have known for some time, really advised me on many complicated issues about equalities in policing and has a very strong policing background. So thank you to Robin. Of course, thank you to Chris, but I must keep my powder dry because he joins our board now and has a different set of agendas to pursue with us. So great to Chris to have you be here. I just want to also say, we appointed together, Chief Constable and I, Kat Payton to the ACC role, and then you allocated her this job, and I have met her since then. I think she has made a very significant difference already. She has been able to take this very disparate and complex area and personalize and drive enthusiasm for the change that's required. And I think that's been a step change in the approach in this area. It's not the policies have changed, but that person has actually brought something quite extraordinary to it. So thank you to ACC, Kat Payton. Very new in post. I can't remember when we appointed her, but months into post. I can see that already. So if there's no other comments to Tom, I'm going to come on to Resources Committee, and I'll ask Chair Grant McRae.
Thank you, Chair. Whilst most of my report can be taken as read, I'd like to highlight a few issues from our meeting on the 13th of August. First of all, on financial monitoring, although it's early in the financial year, we considered the risks to delivery of projected break-even on revenue, capital and reform budgets, with particular focus on the phasing of the capital programme towards the last quarter. Police Scotland has established a new revenue investment group to provide scrutiny and challenge to revenue spending, and we welcome this development. The committee discussed and approved budget revisions, mainly adjusting for costs of staff who've left on VR or VER terms and allocating the overtime contingency. On budgets, it's important for us to look beyond the current financial year, so we looked at the plans for compiling budgets for the next 3 years for revenue and 5 years for capital, both of which need to reflect the revised model of policing, as well as demonstrating a commitment to best value. On police housing, the committee spent a long time on the proposed introduction of a housing occupancy charge for police officers who live in a police-owned home, which has previously been provided at no charge. This has been under discussion within Police Scotland for a while, with issues of fairness, equity, best value, achieving tax compliance, legal implications, and mitigating risks, all given detailed consideration by Police Scotland. The issue of the benefit in kind has been an ongoing one since 1994. HMRC are clear that all employees of public bodies occupying premises without charge will have to pay a benefit in kind charge. And whilst Police Scotland have attempted to seek exemption from this, this has been unsuccessful. So a key reason for the introduction of an occupancy charge arises from legislative and tax requirements, but is to achieve fairness for all officers. It doesn't seem fair that some officers occupy a house without paying rent, while the majority of officers across the country pay rent or a mortgage. The level of occupancy charges proposed is below market rates, and those officers living in HMO accommodation have been paying an occupancy charge since 2013. We learned there's been extensive consultation with all officers impacted on this, and staff associations as well, during which Police Scotland agreed to some mitigations, including delaying the implementation of the occupancy charge to this September. Those employees living in houses needing upgrading will not be required to pay the charge until upgrading has been completed. We learned that EQHRIA and island impact assessments have been completed and will continue to be live documents. The committee particularly explored the fairness issue for all staff and the importance of reviewing, attracting and retention packages for remote and island communities. And members welcomed the additional assurance that divisional commanders will carefully monitor any recruitment and retention issues arising from this occupancy charge. Touching on a couple of other things, on the estates front, in approving the disposal of the unused Portobello Police Station, we focused on ensuring Police Scotland responds to community concerns, not just in relation to this building, but going forward during other consultations. We welcomed the new initiative to roll out mobile police stations, similar to mobile banks, to support local visibility and accessibility. On business cases, we studied the progress review on body-worn video, which DCC Connors has already referred to, and we'll no doubt discuss that later in the agenda. Finally, on change control requests, members are keen to understand the challenges being faced by Police Scotland across change projects that particularly impact on IT. The committee spent time considering these requests and have asked Police Scotland to focus on fully resourcing projects which can be realistically delivered within limited resources. We requested a report which gives oversight of agreed priorities across the change portfolio and to highlight any risks to delivery timelines. Oh, and finally, we had a look at the end project review from the impact of the Hate, Crime and Public Order Scotland Act 2021, and we were assured that lessons have been learned from this, in particular in relation to communication and guidance. Happy to answer any questions, Chair.
Thank you very much, Grant. Any questions for the Chair of the Committee? Okay, thank you very much. Again, it's back to you, Grant, because Mary Pickasey, Chair of Audit, is not able to be here, so you're talking on her behalf, on the committee's behalf. Thank you.
Yes, indeed. Thank you. Very few things to mention. Again, this report has largely can be taken as read, but two things that the Chair has asked me Mary Pickasey has asked me to mention are, first of all, on your leadership matters. We welcome the internal audit report and the areas of good practice identified. The programme is supported by external resources, so we sought assurance that Police Scotland had the in-house capacity to deliver this going forward. And on HMICS scrutiny, we were pleased to welcome HMI Craig Naylor to the meeting to discuss his very positive inspection report on SPA Corporate and to learn about the new scrutiny plan. We also heard about the forthcoming best value inspection across SPA, Forensic Services and Police Scotland during 2025, the scope of which is being developed with the Auditor General. So more information and guidance will hopefully emerge soon. These were the only points that I was going to raise, but happy to answer any questions, Chair.
Thank you very much, Grant. I don't see any hands up, so thank you. At this point, I tend to remind us all that all committees are live streamed. You can watch them. All those live streams are recorded onto our website, so you can watch them in your own time. And the Chief Executive and I have made a lot of trying to drive the detailed consideration of matters into our committees, and the committees to come back at every board meeting, provide us assurance about how things are going and what issues they have. So that is in order that we don't double handle a range of these issues. So if it sometimes seems that we're just going, thank you very much, it's because the real heavy lifting is done in committees, and the reviews I do with the committee chairs of progress and the Chief Executive does with her staff is where that happens. Only comes to us as a general report. I expect, and that is undertaken, that all committee members will read the detailed reports, and a lot of these members are on committees, well, they're all on a committee, or many more than one committee. So just to say that again, it's I don't know how many other public organisations live stream all their committees or archive them in Scotland. And maybe at some time in the next few months, I can find some time to actually find out if anybody follows our very open practice of live streaming on our committees. So thank you for that, and thank you for where we've got to on the committee chairs reports. Item 5, Chief Constable, can I come to you for your report?
Thank you, Chair. I want to thank our communities for their support and good sense during a challenging time which has seen appalling violence and disorder in parts of the United Kingdom. Our thoughts are with the individuals and communities who have been affected in recent weeks, and with our brave colleagues from across UK policing who have put themselves in harm's way to protect the public. We continue to be closely in touch with other services and have provided mutual aid support, a valuable principle in UK policing, which is balance against the needs of policing in Scotland. On Monday this week, I thanked officers who deployed to support colleagues after we responded to a mutual aid request from the Police Service of Northern Ireland. And initial feedback around arrangements and their welfare was very positive. I want to thank all officers and staff who contributed to our response. During the period, I met with the First Minister, John Swinney, the Cabinet Secretary for Justice, Angela Constance, Community Safety Minister, Siobhan Brown, and Secretary of State for Scotland, Ian Murray, to brief them on our response. Chair, you were also fully briefed by myself and other chief officers on a regular basis. As Chief Constable, my priority continues to be safety and security of the people of Scotland, including our officers and staff. People in Scotland have strong relationships with policing in Scotland has strong relationships with the public, and we deeply value our role in contributing to the important social cohesion which has been evident here. I encouraged everyone to be responsible in their use of social media. Please do not share speculation or inaccurate information, and think twice about what you read, share, and believe from online sources. During this time, we increased our patrols and engaged directly with communities to offer reassurance and support. And as part of this, I was pleased to meet with community groups, including Scottish Refugee Council, Interfaith Scotland, and various ethnic and faith groups and individuals in Glasgow, so I was able to listen to their perspectives firsthand. We are closely monitoring the situation to ensure any potential for violence or disorder in Scotland is identified quickly and responded to immediately. Our role is to ensure public safety while balancing the rights of protesters who wish to peacefully demonstrate. And we have sent a clear and consistent message that any violence and disorder that is not legitimate protest will be dealt with swiftly and robustly. The policing demand associated with violence and disorder comes during a busy summer of events, including festivals, sporting events and music concerts, and the general election. And I am grateful to the many officers and staff who have been involved in the planning or providing the support required to allow our communities to go about their business and leisure or exercise their democratic and human rights. An effective, appropriately resourced police service able to support law and order is therefore a prerequisite for social cohesion and economic development necessary for Scotland to thrive and flourish. At the same time, Police Scotland continues to tackle threat, harm and risk, and my report reflects significant court outcomes achieved following police investigations into murder and violent crime, sexual crimes, as well as convictions for drug dealing. National Records of Scotland statistics published this week a powerful reminder of the human tragedy caused by drug addiction, and we work hard to ensure Scotland remains a hostile environment for those who import illegal drugs and deal in misery and death. My report highlights drug recoveries by officers since the latest SPA board, and this is vital work to prevent illegal substances from entering our communities. Of course, this is only a selection of the seizures, disruption and enforcement undertaken right across the country, day in, day out. But it is important the authority has a sense of the type of day-to-day policing that is ongoing and which is a priority for Police Scotland. At the same time, we support a health-led partnership approach to tackling the harm presented by substance addiction, whether that's by officers administering naloxone when first on scene a suspected opioid overdose, or taking a supportive stance on the establishment of a safer drug consumption facility. Throughout the summer, we continued our focus on road safety through education and enforcement, and working with our partners, reducing the tragedy and harm of road deaths and injuries continues to be an absolute priority for policing. Closer, more effective work with partners is vital for the ongoing success of policing and the safety and well-being of our communities. My report outlines important examples of such work, which have been illustrated in recent weeks, including the 10-year anniversary event of the Scottish Crime Campus, to tackle organised crime, the national rollout of DESC, digital evidence sharing capability, which better serves victims and witnesses, which we've heard about, and reduces demand on officers, and the fantastic work in Lanarkshire, as discussed. Such developments are a crucial part of the necessary changes to ensure Police Scotland can provide effective policing within the funding available, particularly in relation to reducing the unsustainable demand on officers who are repeatedly cited for court cases which do not go ahead. I've been clear, and I do not believe this is fair or efficient, and reform must be prioritised and accelerated. Working closely with the support and oversight of the authority, we continue to make progress on the revised model of policing so that our service meets future challenges. And of course, our workforce profile will be an important aspect of those discussions, and my position on officer numbers remain clear, that I want to bring the front line of policing to its strongest position possible. We are recruiting officers now, and we have welcomed over 250 probationary constables last month as part of our plans to recruit over 1,300 officers during 24-25, the highest number in a single year for Police Scotland. Last Friday, I congratulated 115 probationary constables as they prepared to deploy to serve communities across Scotland following the completion of their initial training. It is important that together we continue to be clear that the context of frontline strength goes way beyond an overall officer headcount, and it is important we continue to maximise experienced officers performing frontline operational policing in our communities. And at the same time, policing in Scotland has worked over a period of years to strengthen our financial rigour, and I remain committed to delivering on a balanced budget. My report highlights and thanks the Independent Review Group that carried out the work in relation to our anti-discriminatory work, and the IRG provided a really important report for us. Lastly, I continue to greatly enjoy meeting officers, staff and partners across Scotland to hear directly from them, and in recent weeks I've met officers from Shetland and Orkney, during which I was briefed on our work with Dogs Against Drugs, on our joint work to deter and detect illegal drugs entering the islands. I also met with MSP Beatrice Wishart and the Chief Executive of Auckland Island Council, Oliver Reid, and NHS Orkney Chief Executive Laura Strife-Knight, as well as local councillors. Last week I met with officers at our Marine and Dive Unit and Air Support Unit in Glasgow, during which I was able to listen to how drones are deployed to respond to incidents and how ultimately they help to save lives. Drones are a low-cost, sustainable asset that improve our ability to search large areas and decrease the risk faced by officers in difficult environments. They can provide an overview of crowd safety at events, and aerial imagery is presented to those in command of such events. Over a number of years, we've built a strong relationship with the Civil Aviation Authority, and our ambition is to provide an accessible and agile service across the whole of Scotland, using the right air assets for the right type of task, whether it be drone or helicopter, in order to provide the best value and benefit to our communities. During a visit to Glenrothes, I also had the opportunity to congratulate and thank 6-year-old Anthony Green as he completed visits of over 50 police stations to raise over £2,000 for the Police Benevolent Fund. I'll pause there, Chair, and welcome any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chief Constable. I've got quite a range of questions I can ask. People to keep them quite succinct so we can get through them. I can start with Paul Eadie. Paul.
Thank you, Chair. Chief Constable, in your report you cited a number of drug seizures with quite a wide range, from quite small seizures to quite large ones, and also some significant convictions. And you also referred to a health approach in tandem with those. And I'm wondering if you could perhaps expand on this, and I'm particularly keen to hear about your strategic approach to the issue and topic of drugs in Scotland, and particularly how you might target people higher up the supply hierarchy.
Thank you for the question. So I referenced in my report, as well as the drug seizures, I referenced there the 10-year anniversary of the Scottish Crime Campus, which brings together different agencies under one roof, with an absolute focus around serious and organised crime, of which drug supply is a key component. So that is a strategic resource that is able to focus and deploy across the whole of Scotland, and has links beyond our boundaries, so that we're able to react to intelligence that allows us to focus where people are committing those crimes, where they are peddling that misery that's brought about through drug use. And in addition to that, we're able to link with partners and derive and benefit from the information intelligence that they have. And so that's in that serious and organised crime area of business. But key to that is equally important, the intelligence that we see that's generated at a community policing level. Because our approach, our pursuit of drug dealers needs both locally based officers able to react and respond to the concerns of communities, as well as that national resource that uses capabilities, covert capabilities often, in order to tackle those who involve themselves in this sort of criminality. Specifically in relation to the public health approach, our approach in terms of enforcement in relation to these types of crimes is very much to take a robust approach against those who are dealing drugs. But at the same time, we have opportunities and use tactics in order to both identify those who are using drugs and be able to put them in touch with individuals in other organisations that can support that drug use. So very much our focus is on those who are dealing in drugs and making vast amounts of money, and with those who are you could say, the victims of that drug consumption, very much engaging with partners in order to support them. I'm going to ask DC Smith to add a few more points in relation to that question. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Just a couple of points to add, really. I think it's really important to consider the fact that we are members of the Scottish Government SOC Task Force, chaired by the CABSEC, and at that meeting, we will go into a lot of detail around the public health approach. And from that meeting, we then chair a separate multi-agency meeting where we bring our partners around the table and we look at what are the strategic priorities for each organisation in terms of tackling drug supply and drug harm. And that can be from, as the Chief's referenced, that the high end of high harm, but also really importantly that local community level. How are we getting the intelligence supply through to understand what that looks like for our priorities? Then using that intelligence to take action at a local level in terms of disrupting some of what might be seen as lower level supply, but actually has a huge impact in terms of the community footprint that we're dealing with in terms of policing. So I think we take quite a unique approach to that. We also look at offending behaviour and we look at hotspots across Scotland. So where do we see the most offences taking place in terms of drug supply, and we put our resources in those particular areas. We've definitely invested in that to understand demand so that we can respond to that, I think, in terms of drug supply. So hopefully that answers your question. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. That's a very comprehensive overview of the approach. I mean, I'm reminded of the great Tip O'Neill, who used to say all politics is local, but actually, when you think about it, all crime is local, because wherever there's a victim, they're somewhere. So what you're saying about local intelligence, I think I really like what I'm hearing on that. So thank you. Thanks.
You mentioned Gartcrosh. Both of us were at the 10th anniversary visit to Gartcrosh. Can you give from your experience whether that is unique in policing in the UK, and what your broad view about the benefits to us as citizens from having that co-location of UK and Scottish resources to tackle crime and harm?
Thank you, Chair. It's absolutely unique in the UK in bringing together key both law enforcement partners, but broader partners under one roof, allowing easy exchange of information intelligence, and really drawing on the capabilities of individual agencies, but pooling the expertise, resource. And those agencies span beyond the boundary of Scotland, National Crime Agency, UK-wide, and colleagues that work at the Crime Campus also have reach beyond the United Kingdom and are able to liaise and work closely with colleagues in law enforcement, both across Europe and across the world. And we've seen that evidence through extradition of individuals who are wanted for very serious crimes in Scotland, in the UK, and we're able to bring them back and ensure that the victims see justice done and they receive the full force of the law through the criminal justice system. So it is unique. Our ambition moving forward is to move, I suppose, from a partnership approach to a fully integrated approach. And a vision around having integrated teams so that individuals aren't sitting within one agency, but we pool those resources and we move to a fully integrated model. There are many examples of excellent work, and to reinforce, it's absolutely unique, and Scotland and our communities derive a significant amount of benefit, and I'm grateful for the leadership shown across that system and through Scottish Government in that space. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I got Paul Pauline, and then Grant. Pauline.
Thanks very much for your very informative report. Page 10 talks about the police cyber crimes cyber alarms digital tool, and I wondered if you could say a bit more about how we're encouraging its adoption across businesses and organisations. This has been one of the key risks that they'll no doubt be facing. Thanks.
Thank you. This is part of our Policing in a Digital World programme, and is very much in the area of prevention. So what the alarms do is they allow businesses to use this technology in order to early identification where they may be subject of a cyber attack. And we've all seen, haven't we, across large public sector bodies, the impact of a cyber attack, both in terms of data being lost, but also the huge disruption that it can cause. So we know that in relation to the cyber threat, we are not going to be able to police our way out of the challenge and out of the threat. We need to be able to provide both to individuals and businesses the opportunity to take those preventative measures so that you can identify if there's vulnerabilities around your IT systems and be able to then flag that up, and we're able to support individuals in relation to that. We have a number of partners working with us in relation to the Digital World programme, and part of that is that education and the ability to raise the awareness about this technology existing and what benefits it can bring to businesses in order to stop their business being disrupted and undermined. So it's an ongoing program. This is early part of it, but really important area of business in terms of that prevention around cyber attack.
Thank you much, Grant. Then Tom. Grant.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much, Chief Constable, for your report. There's one section I'd like to just home in on, and it's a section on road safety on page 9. I very much agree with your concerns about the high number of fatal and serious road traffic collisions in the recent weeks. In your report, you mentioned working with other partners to improve road safety for all you road users, you should say, and I wonder if you'd say a little bit more about that.
Thank you. I'm going to ask DCC Connors to respond to this question. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the question. I think, firstly, we totally understand and can see the impact on families and friends of fatal and serious accidents, and we're very concerned and working very closely with partners to ensure that we improve road safety through awareness in particular. So there's an older drivers programme which commenced in July, and I think this is really important because the referrals that come into that are a mix from the NHS, police and the DVLA. It's particularly available at which we're working in Aberdeen. And the reason for the referrals is to ensure that people who think they're safe driving actually who need that extra awareness of hazards. The testing has been working well in Aberdeen and there is very positive feedback. So that's an older drivers programme. There's also the Rider Refinement East and West programme, which was launched in August 2024, and that's to complement the programme that's already running in the north. That's a one-day road safety programme designed for motorcyclists, which provides an advice and guidance on safer riding and signposts motorcyclists to further training. It is a multi-agency partnership initiative. It's hosted by Police Scotland, Scottish Fire and Rescue Service, but it has Road Safety Scotland and I Am Road Smart, so very much a partnership approach, which is key. It's delivered by road policing motorcyclists and supported by observers from I Am Road Smart. We're also progressing with plans to implement a fixed penalty notice, which once issued, actually, if it's not paid, it would normally go back to officers to complete reports before it goes into the COPFS, but working with partners, able to pass directly into the Scottish Courts and Tribunal Service for endorsement and points. The point of commenting on that is that it gives us more visibility and focused on prevention activity because officers are out on the roads doing the jobs they should. So again, very grateful to justice partners for being able to take some of that forward. And in order to make sure that we are actually changing behaviours, progressing road traffic diversionary courses as an alternative to reporting to COPFS because those courses are known to cut reoffending rates and improve driver behaviour. It's not just about enforcement, we need to change behaviour to prevent the accidents. So those are just some of the highlights that Police Scotland in particular, and grateful to road traffic colleagues who are doing all of this work, particularly with partners.
Thank you very much. That's very helpful.
Thank you very much, Tom, and then Alistair. Tom.
Chair. Chief Constable, your report rightly talks about the violent disorder that's been experienced across the UK in recent weeks. And like the board, like yourself, would want to acknowledge the bravery and the commitment of staff, and officers going to Northern Ireland and mutual aid. But we also talk about the social cohesion in Scotland, where we didn't see the same level of violent disorder. But could you give us some comment on the threat from far-right wing extremism in Scotland, in order that we're assured that the right resources are in the right place, that the emphasis is there, and we're not complacent with that situation?
Thank you. Thank you for the question. So throughout, as I indicated in both my written and verbal report, throughout the time following the murders of the 3 children in Southport, we mobilised a response in anticipation of any disorder and violence, and that had a number of elements to it. Immediately deploying local officers on the ground, highly visible, to reassure communities, some of which, and I heard this firsthand, were frightened. Were frightened by what was being said on social media, and that disinformation that was being spread that we saw then south of the border, resulting in violence and disorder. So our one of the key responses was to ensure that we had that visible presence on the street, and we were able to reassure individuals. In addition to that, looking and considering if the right wing mobilised in response and reaction to what was being seen south of the border, and that misinformation that was circulating, ensuring that we had the right capabilities in order to deal with that. And Police Scotland has a strong history and foundation in relation to both working with those who want to peacefully protest, and also those who want to use protest for violence and intimidation. And that's been demonstrated both through peaceful pro-Palestinian marches, our response week in, week out around football matches and the threats that they pose, and our deployments in relation to COP26. And as you said, our mutual aid requests from colleagues in Northern Ireland. But in terms of the monitoring of the far right, that's an ongoing piece of work. It's an ongoing commitment from us that we need to maintain. Although it appears that things have calmed, that we maintain both a continued analysis of intelligence and what's been said around social media, and we are able to reassure communities in that space, and at the same time people who may be planning different events in the coming weeks. So it's ongoing, and we use all sorts of different techniques in order to do that, so that we have the best insight. But what we did during the early days of seeing the violence south of the border were very clear in relation to putting right misinformation that was being circulated on social media, and people in this room and listening will be aware of this misinformation in relation to an alleged perpetrator around a violent crime in Stirling. We came out very quickly and said the alleged perpetrator of this is white and Scottish, in order to dampen down that misinformation that we saw take hold elsewhere and created both a momentum and emboldened people to involve themselves in violence, take to the streets, and really put communities in fear and at harm. So it's ongoing, and we'll continue to monitor, take views from communities and use every technique available to us, both overtly looking at what runs on social media, but at the same time covert capabilities that we have in order to keep a close eye and ensure that our response matches any threat that's been posed to communities.
Alistair.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chief Constable, for your report. As always, it gives us some really valuable insights into the scope and the complexity of the work undertaken by Police Scotland. And I know that human rights is a central plank in terms of your approach. But with the UN Convention on Human Rights for Children in relation to violence passing into law, I wonder what impact that will have in terms of your existing policies. Is there a need to review them? Is there a need for the approach and the challenging circumstances that frontline officers find themselves? Is there a need for more support there?
Thank you. Thank you for the question. So as part of our response to that change in legislation, absolutely a requirement, an additional legislative requirement on us in relation to considering the rights of children, and we are working through policies, and I suppose you could equate it to a degree to any change in policy. We would also always consider what are the impacts on individuals with protected characteristics, and we're taking a similar approach in terms of the requirements around the UN legislation around children. We're working our way through those policies. We've identified a priority around them, and we'll work our way through and ensure that they are compliant and we are upholding the rights of children as per the new legislation.
Thank you very much. Fiona, I'd like if you could ask your question about police officer numbers.
Thanks, Chair. Chief Constable, you talked about the very large number of probationers that you've brought in and are planning to bring in this year. I know through reports at People Committee, there has also been real attention about how to both improve probationer training in terms of making sure that they're as well prepared as possible on a variety of issues, but including equality and diversity, and also looking at how you can widen access to people with, particularly with protected characteristics, but not exclusively so, the course at Jackton, for instance. Do you have a sense of when you'll reach your optimum numbers of police officers through this, taking into account turnover and people retiring, moving, and through this increased number of probationers being brought in?
Thank you. And a couple of points before I come to your point around the numbers and the direction around those numbers. We heard at the last board the programme of probationary training that's been conducted at Jackton. I met those officers a few weeks ago, partly to reassure them that training was in no way different to colleagues that were being trained at the Staff College. We do hope it brings some additional opportunities for people who may not consider policing being a career for them and are put off by that residential nature of our course at Tullyallen. And we said last time we'll carry out a full evaluation in relation to that. In relation to diversity and protected characteristics, we are taking our recruitment campaign around the whole of the country and focusing in different areas and really taking the expertise to the people that we want to encourage and being able to answer those questions firsthand. So that will continue during the autumn. In relation to police officer numbers, as I said in my report earlier on, we will recruit more people than we have ever recruited this year, over 1,300, and that is fantastic in one respect. There are additional pressures being put across the whole of our workforce, whether it's in our recruitment teams all the way through to our tutor constables and our frontline sergeants who need to support new officers as they enter into the organisation. In response specifically to your question, towards the back end of the calendar year or the early part of next year, and the reason I can't be more precise than that is because police officer numbers fluctuate, and the numbers fluctuate because of ill health retirements, because of retirements, and so on any one day the number is moving. We have agreed that we will report on that to Scottish Government at the beginning of every month, and we'll bring that into the committee here. But with those numbers is the quality of those people and the diversity of those people. And the bar to joining Police Scotland is a high one. I would describe coming into policing, the bar is high, and it is a privilege, and it's important that we recruit and select the right people with the right values, but also that they are trustworthy, they uphold those values, and we can ensure that with our support they become professional and productive officers for us. So towards the end of the calendar year into the new year, but I'll be reporting regularly on that. Thank you.
Sorry, can you just clarify that? Are you giving a number that we'll have by the end of the calendar year, or an indication of what the range?
Sorry. Between 16,500, 16,600, 16,600.
By the end of the calendar year.
Or into the early part of the new year because of that fluctuation. Thank you.
I know Fiona might have one more question, but I'm going to just ask the board. Anybody else on the board got a question they'd like to ask? Okay, I'd like to ask your question about facial recognition, if you wouldn't mind.
Yes, I think it's joining up. You were a speaker at the Biometrics Conference through in Edinburgh over the past month or two, and having reflected on the very distressing scenes that have been in England in terms of the trouble and your response to Tom, I wondered if you could share your view on the place of live facial recognition in prevention of violence and early detection of those who are perpetrating it.
Thank you. I'm going to ask DCC Smith to pick this particular question up. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Thanks for the question. I think in terms of a view, absolutely it's something that I think is critically important for policing. However, the way we approach that is really important, particularly in Scotland. And I think a couple of points which hopefully will help draw that out. So we know that there are police forces in the UK that are using live facial recognition and also retrospective facial recognition, and those are two very different things we know, as well as other technologies that sit in AI, biometric space, etc. So in fact recently we met with the Chief Scientific Advisor for Policing in the UK under NPCC to understand what technology is being implemented throughout the UK in terms of policing context. It was really helpful, and at that meeting we had two advisors from Scotland to put the Scottish context in terms of the public perception of some of that technology and how we might bring that about. I learned an awful lot around that, and I suppose the next steps in relation to that are twofold really. One is to make sure we learn from the implementation of technology in England and Wales in a policing context, and the second is to make sure we respect the rights of the public in terms of how we do that. And there is a really set path of how we bring in new technology now, which I'm really confident in terms of consultation. We have our data ethics group who consider all of those difficult elements in terms of bringing in technology. And we also have our rights-based pathway, which we involve experts to give us a view. And then we use public consultation to seek an opinion in terms of how we would utilise that technology. So in answer to your question, we are really supportive as an organisation around facial recognition, whether that's live or retrospective, as well as other technologies in that space, because we know the benefit to the communities in terms of protection. But we are really alive to the fact that something like that has to be really carefully considered in terms of public consultation and ethics and how we would bring that in lawfully and proportionately. We have a working group now around live facial recognition where we've got several experts to give us opinions and views, and we will use that process to bring that through and make sure committee and boards are well cited in terms of the proposals around that moving forward.
Thank you very much. That Biometrics Commission conference, which we jointly organised with the Scottish Biometrics Commission and Police Scotland, was a very important event. At the end of it, both the Chief Constable and I indicated that time is right for national conversation about live facial recognition without any commitment to introducing it. But we need to actually have that informed debate, professional policing debate, the Biometrics Commission engage with it, and as you say, to balance the issues of public safety and all our civil liberties and privacy. So I'm hoping that's going to be undertaken over this year, and we're very open as a board about what might happen after that. If I don't have any other questions from the board members, what I'm going to do is I'm going to call a short comfort break now, and if I could ask you to be back in about 10 or 12 minutes, and we'll then continue with the Chief Executive's report. Thanks very much. Indeed, I'd like to restart the board meeting at item 6, which is a Chief Executive's report. Chief Executive Brown.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. I would like to talk very briefly to the report, the written report, and then there's 2 verbal updates I'd like to give you, and you've agreed that I could do that. So starting with the report, when you were appointed Chair, you were quite clear that one of the things you wanted to see was that the SPA engaged with other jurisdictions to do 2 things. Policing jurisdictions to understand and learn from best practice, to share any best practice that we have developed ourselves. And my report covers that in 2 ways. We engage with the Association of Police and Crime Commissioners. We go to their meetings, and it's set out there, the last meeting in July, and we are there to understand best practice. Also, we have taken a review of the Policing Productivity Review, again, that highlights best practice to see what we can learn from in Scotland. And finally, in my section on the Antisocial Behaviour Working Group, that's the other side of the coin, where we have developed best practice around public polling work and the Community Confidence Action Research, and the Antisocial Behaviour Working Group asked for information on that. In the written report, I'd also like to draw your attention to the section on the proposals to consider the coronavirus legislation and timeframes, and that's really just to alert the board that forensics are very much on top of that, the Forensics Committee are, but I just want to bring to your attention that we expect a change in that going forward. So that's all I want to say about my written report. I just want to, in terms of verbal, the first one is to do with, you'll realise over the last few days there's been information from the Scottish Government. They had announced that due to severe in-year financial challenges, they'd be putting in place actions to reduce spend in 24-25. And it's only last night that I got a letter in to myself and to you, Chair, from the Cabinet Secretary setting out the parameters around that. I just want to mention it now, but I much prefer that Mr. Gray and I touch base on that when we discuss the finance forecast. I'll pause there before I give my final update for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions to the Chief Executive on her report or her verbal update? Angela Leach. Angela.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Lynn. Could I just ask a bit about paragraph 3.2, and you made reference to it on antisocial behaviour, the working group that you mentioned. And it might be something that the Chief Constable wants to comment as well, because it relates to a part of your update on the violence in other parts of the UK. It was in particular the data, insights and evidence that has been pulled together by that group. And are we beginning to see, are we picking up on anything that would then lead us to see that there is pick up unrest or evidence of unrest in parts of the country? Or does it continue to look at nuisance and the prevalence of nuisance behaviour?
Thank you for the question. This is an independent group that's been set up by the Scottish Government, and we actually aren't on the group. Fortunately, Mr. Tom Halpin, one of our board members, is on it, but he's there in a personal capacity due to his expertise in policing and in SACRO, so Mr. Halpin might want to comment on that. So we're not involved in the day-to-day consideration of what they're doing. I will go back with your question, Angela. We provide evidence of best practice that we're doing around antisocial behaviour. The group is to look at the current approach to antisocial behaviour, to make long-term recommendations to ministers to reduce antisocial behaviour and to better support victims. So that's what they're doing. In terms of the recent public disorder, I can't comment on that. Mr. Halpin might want to say something, but we'll definitely go back and ask that question.
Tom.
Thank you. So it's in my register of interest, so it's quite clear. I'm a member of the independent group, which is looking at antisocial behaviour, the legislation and the experiences of communities at this time. And Police Scotland have been very, very deeply involved in providing information, as have the Scottish Police Authority, and there's been particular interest in the work of the community confidence action research project that's been ongoing, looking at 3 communities and how, particularly communities with the significant issues around deprivation and antisocial behaviour, are experiencing it differently. The work of the group will report towards the end of this year or the next year to Minister Direct, and that will inform the future work of what needs to be done in terms of what is required from antisocial behaviour. It's fair to say that it's experienced differently by different communities and by different individuals. And the learning that will come from the violent disorder that's happened across the UK will be very significant. But that is criminal in its own right in terms of antisocial behaviour, which might actually, in some cases, not be criminal. So there's a distinction between tackling criminal conduct and areas where it could be public nuisance, for instance. But it's all under review at the moment.
So can I just ask Tom, from your insights on that group in terms of what Andrew talked about, prevalence, is there any data trend? And I know that it's undertaken sometimes by Alistair Hayes' Performance Committee. Any, from your insights on that group, data trends on the prevalence reporting of antisocial behaviour?
There's a significant area of work within the group at the moment, looking at what data is available. And it's fair to say that that's inconsistent at this time.
The reason I mention it, and I'll come and ask the Chief Constable of her team would like to say anything, is that when I speak to the local scrutiny conveners around Scotland, this is always one of the top 2 or 3 issues that they come back with. What is described as antisocial behaviour is a very wide band, but it's consistently about the incivilities suffered in communities which might be non-crime but are felt very deeply in those areas. So I think it's one of those wicked issues that's been going on for years and years. I wish your group the best. Chief Constable, I don't know if you'd like to respond to Angela about these issues.
DCC Connors will pick up the response. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think the first thing to say is that Police Scotland, we do take antisocial behaviour really, really seriously. Absolutely understand the significant impact it has on communities and individuals. It's very much having a focused prevention but a partnership approach to tackling antisocial behaviour. And I think the comments about sharing data and being able to understand the trends that happen into that and the causes of it, which we know are complex, from poor mental health, the potential misuse of drugs and alcohol, poverty, housing, all these are often factors, and they're very much shared around a partnership approach to it. I think that's one of the things to link with the revised model of policing very much has at its core an enhanced community policing model, because the visibility in communities, ensuring that there are local officers to work with partners is absolutely essential to that. And part of the research that has come out of it is actually when police are not visible, you do see an impact on antisocial behaviour. So we know the links between that and visible policing. We do have some work to do in our areas around that. More people think that we're not tackling antisocial behaviour than think that we are. So there is some work that we need to do around that. Visibility, community model, strengthening the front line, the revised model of policing is really important. Antisocial behaviour is routinely in a number of the local policing plans, so it is something that we look at a very local level. But to look at it from a macro level as an organisation, ACC Sutherland does chair a violence, disorder and antisocial behaviour monthly meeting, and that is around operational activity but as well as statistics and trends. We're very much trying to focus on that. In fact, we know that antisocial behaviour has reduced by 5% compared to last year, which is a good trend, but it's something we need to focus on much, much more. And as I say, that community model. So I think that's all I would say at this point, Chair, except for the fact that, in particular, the disorder that was mentioned and the violence, that strengthening that community model is really important. But that low-level antisocial behaviour, in terms of community tension impact, really tells you sometimes what is lying underneath the communities. And one final thing, Chair, just in relation to the violence that was spoken about, what we didn't mention was the impact on our internal staff, so I would just like to mention that there at this point. But our focus on antisocial behaviour is absolutely key. We understand the importance and the impact it has on communities and individuals. So thank you.
Thank you. very much welcome the focus that's going to be within the revised model of policing on community policing and your priority you're giving to antisocial behaviour. Thank you very much. Any final thoughts from you on that issue? Okay. Any other questions to the Chief Executive? Oh, you had one more verbal update for us.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Following on from your update to the board on the conclusion of your tenure in January 2025, I would like to update the board on my intention to retire in 2025, probably around the autumn. There are two key factors, one personal and one professional, that have been central to my decision to retire. Personally, Chair, you are aware that 3 years ago I had successful treatment and surgery for a rare cancer, and in 2025, in fact at the end of 24, I will be embarking on my 66th year, and I am grateful for that and would like to be in a position to fully embrace that. Professionally, in 2025, the SPA will be 12 years old, and in that time it has had 5 CEOs. And in 2025, I will have been CEO for 6 years, half the lifetime of this young, evolving and continually improving organisation. In such a young organisation, we have had many challenges, and this board and the SPA staff have tackled these head on. The result is that the recent HMICS has said that we have best practice in governance, accountability and transparency. So it's definitely the right time for me to pass the baton. My retirement, however, Chair, is not imminent. I look forward to helping the new Chair settle in and to help them recruit a new CEO for the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lynn. Of course, I knew about that beforehand. Very grateful for all the work that Lynn has done to lead the organisation. And I'm particularly grateful that she's agreed to stay on over this period to induct the new chair into this vastly complicated organisation and to give that new chair the benefit of her advice, which I have found extraordinarily valuable over my tenure. Also, in order to help the new chair recruit a new chief executive, they need somebody with the wisdom and experience of Lynn beside them. So whilst I've given you 5 months' notice, Lynn is giving you at least 12 months' notice. So you've got both of us for half a year, and Lynn, who's far more important, for the entire year. So I know Lynn wouldn't want a eulogy at this point. We will be able to celebrate her fantastic achievements much nearer her retirement. But thank you, Lynn, and thank you for letting us know that. Thank you very much. With that, I'm going to come on to item 7, which is a Forensic Services Director's report. I'm hoping you're not going to be retiring.
No plans to retire anytime soon, you'll be pleased to know. Thank you, Chair. And I'll take my report as read. Forensic Services continues to track closely to the agreed revenue budget for the year, with 10% of our capital budget spent year to date, which continues to be an area of focus. And there is a clear plan in place to ensure that the full capital allocation is spent by the end of the financial year. Staff numbers are continuing to track under budget due to delays in bringing in external appointments. However, a plan is in place to ensure that we're managing vacancies carefully to meet demand across the service rather than on a straightforward vacancy replacement basis. In addition, a revised approach to recruiting into our entry-level posts defined in the new operating model is in the process of being implemented, where we will be over-recruiting into these posts with the expectation of staff moving through these roles more regularly than others across the organisation. There is also work ongoing to consider the establishment of modern apprenticeships into forensic services. These apprenticeship posts will need to balance organisational needs and resilience with providing opportunity for individuals to grow and develop within forensic services. Forensic Services are currently working with Police Scotland People and Development to develop a full proposal for consideration. This will then be discussed through the senior management team and then with colleagues in the trade unions. Performance across Sorry, I've just lost my screen. Right, performance across the service remains good, and it's particularly notable that continued improvement is being made in scene incident response times. Our National Scenes Tasking Unit continues to bed in to support this improvement. Other benefits of the new operating model for forensic services are being tracked, including the impact of the introduction of the new management roles and structure, and it's good to see that recorded absences continue to improve as the year progresses. The Drug Driving Toxicology Improvement Plan continues to deliver improvement in our internal capacity to analyse samples, alongside further streamlining of processes to improve timeliness. We continue to rely on outsourcing for some testing, which is sent to a private forensic science provider in England in order to manage the demand for the service alongside the improvement activity. This is critical to ensure that no backlogs form and that statutory time limits continue to be met. We continue to work with colleagues in Police Scotland to ensure that effective processes are in place across all the policing divisions to transfer samples into forensic services for analysis in a timely manner. Work continues with the Operation Hitch Drug Driving Improvement Group to ensure readiness for the change in the statutory time limit, which is anticipated in December this year. This group includes representation from forensic services, Police Scotland, the Crown Office, Scottish Government and Transport Scotland. Forensic services, alongside our colleagues in the SPA corporate, are working with a specialist company as part of our priority to understand how to create a culture in forensic services where everyone can be at their best, valuing our differences and ensuring how we work includes everyone. As part of the initial work, our staff have completed a survey, and some will then participate in focus groups to gather further information and lived experiences from our staff. After this has been evaluated, they will provide a report setting out practical steps to take around inclusion and highlight areas of success and improvement, which will then be incorporated into our business plans and the refresh of the forensic services strategy. Our search and recovery scene examination staff have also been participating in our psychological supervision project. This involves them having regular meetings with an independent counsellor. This is a 3-year project with us drawing to the end of the first year. A detailed full evaluation of the pilot will be completed in due course. However, initial anecdotal feedback has been encouraging, with a focus group being scheduled to gather further feedback and to consider any adaptations that will need to be made for further years. Forensic Services has started a comprehensive self-assessment to demonstrate best value across the organisation. This will show our commitment to continuous improvement and ensuring best value in public service. 7 work streams have been identified, and the senior management team will be engaging with staff across the service to get them involved in the assessment. This work will be reported to the Audit, Risk and Assurance Committee as it progresses. Alongside this important work, the Forensic Value Steering Group met earlier this month to provide an update on the work required to demonstrate the value of forensic science. This work is being undertaken in partnership with the Leverhulme Institute for Forensic Science Research, who are providing the funding to support a researcher for up to 2 years. The researcher has now been appointed and the work will begin next month. Following comments made by the Director General of the National Crime Agency at the board meeting in May, I have provided a briefing to the Chair and the Forensic Services Committee in relation to nitazines and their impact on forensic services. A copy of this report is provided at Appendix 1 in my Director's report. Nitazines are synthetic opioids and are a specific cause for concern due to their potency. Nitazines have been detected across most areas of Scotland. However, their prevalence is very low, and this has not caused an issue for forensic services. We continue to work with partners, particularly Public Health Scotland, to provide data to monitor the impact these types of drugs have on the public and communities across the country. The report sets out data in relation to analysis undertaken in forensic services, including from our drugs teams that identify substances in physical drug seizures, as well as drugs that are identified in body fluids from our toxicology teams. This can be from criminal cases such as drug driving or from post-mortem samples taken by a pathologist as part of the determination of cause of death. The report shows that nitazines have been detected in 15 drug seizures since 2021. This is around 0.2% of the total cases that have been received for testing during this period, so it is very low. Across Scotland, since June of 2022, there have been 64 fatalities where a nitazene was detected. In all of these cases, there have been other drugs present, and it has not been confirmed if the nitazenes were implicated in the cause of death or if they were incidental. To put the 64 cases in context, in the same period, Forensic Services has detected more than 1,000 cases which were positive for morphine or heroin. The concentration of the nitazene found is low, but due to their potency, it could be significant. There is currently no significant impact on the operation of Forensic Services to analyse and detect nitazenes, other than the need to ensure that we continue to invest in technology and training of our experts to allow new drugs to be detected as they are developed. When further considering the impact on the public, nitazenes are not usually sought out as the drug of choice and are more often taken unexpectedly alongside other drugs such as heroin. Therefore, there is a risk of overdose. The Scottish Drugs Forum are currently supplying some simple testing strips to people who use drugs. However, these can provide false positive or negative results. However, it does initiate important engagement between people who use drugs and drug treatment services. Public Health Scotland is leading a multi-agency group to determine the best response should there be any significant cluster of adverse events involving nitazenes in relation to drug overdoses, such as the one in Dublin last year. Forensic Services will have an important part to play to ensure that swift drug testing can be undertaken to identify any substances in this type of event to support other emergency services and to ensure the most accurate public health information is available. There are well-established public health protocols for public health emergencies, and a cluster involving nitazenes would be treated as such. In recent months, and with nitazenes specifically in mind, Forensic Services experts have been working closely with partners to ensure we are prepared for any potential cluster of adverse events. This has included working with Public Health Scotland and Police Scotland on national guidance for such an event, including options for Forensic Services assistance, working with local alcohol and drug partnerships and drug trend monitoring groups on local processes which incorporate the national guidance, and consideration of a tabletop exercise. Forensic Services is strengthening our partnerships with other laboratories in Scotland to ensure swift and appropriate sharing of information regarding drugs of concern to ensure that we are monitoring trends. Nitazenes are still very rare in Scotland, as the data in my report shows, but with increasing public concern, we will continue to work with our partners to monitor and adapt to ensure that we continue to deliver scientific excellence to keep the communities and public of Scotland well informed and protected. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. I'd like to start off with a conversation or questions about nitazene, which I know that Angela would like to engage with. Just while we're doing that, I just get that clear in my own head that some of these nitazene products, which are artificial opiates, are 500 times more potent than heroin? Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
And so they may be mixed with other drugs?
Yes,
and therefore
that's
taken
right.
Unknowingly? Yeah.
Yes, they can often be part
So they are
with other drugs.
They are a synthetic opioid, and they are, I assume, illegal, because that's the problem, catching up with the synthetics. So they are
illegal substances.
Great. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for that. And thank you for attaching that report. I asked that to come here to the board. It was news to all of us on this one, and I think that's the early warning that you're giving us. I think Angela wants to talk about what might happen if there was this cluster, which you talked about.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It was particularly on that planning that you mentioned, Fiona. I know that nationally there are exercises that are run periodically when there are risks like this identified. And you've touched on the work that you're doing with Public Health Scotland. I'm just mindful that it might not just be nitazenes, but we're seeing the prevalence of drugs on our streets increasing over the period, and Chief Constable talked about that in our report as well. In terms of the wider work, and there has been the drugs mission work for a long period of time, are there any specific areas that you or the Chief Constable would identify in terms of actions that we can take just now to work more upstream. And I know that this is a really big question, but what are the short-term specifics that we might do to reduce some of the pressures that are both on your service and indeed Police Scotland?
Thank you very much for the question. I think the most important thing that we can do right now is to be better at sharing data and to really be able to look at the intelligence picture as a result of that data. There is a lot of different sources of drugs intelligence data. Forensic Services holds a lot of that, given that we're testing not only physical drug seizures, but also the toxicology analysis of drugs in body fluids in relation to drug driving, for example, which is significant, but also the post-mortem toxicology services that we offer. But there is also toxicology data held within the NHS. There's a lot of drugs testing that happens in prisons. There's drugs testing that's being started with users. And there is also some environmental data which could all be brought together to bring a really rich intelligence picture of drug use across the country. And I think that's an area where collectively all of the different organisations that have that data need to work to share it, work through the barriers of data sharing generally, and look at how we can really get a picture of where prevention, education, enforcement activity can happen on the back of that. And you're absolutely right to comment that there are lots of substances which are misused, and nitazines are very low in terms of their prevalence across the country. There are far more significant drugs in use, which we need to make sure that we continue to focus on and really target.
Thank you very much. I'd like you to continue on with this drugs theme. I think you had a question about the drugs task force and engagement. Would you like to follow that up?
Well, it's thank you, and it is precisely on that. Perhaps have an update on the work of the drugs task force and the specific actions that are being taken. I understand that there is a plan that's in place just now. I wondered whether there might be an opportunity just to hear a wee bit more about that. And in response to what you've just said, Director, the data sharing, the barriers have, in my experience, been, there forever. Is there a particular action that would help us to overcome that, given the importance in addressing this rising risk?
I think that there's discussions that need to be had. There's a strategic conversation that the Leverhulme Institute for Forensic Science Research are hosting towards the end of this month that I'll be attending with some colleagues within Forensic Services. And that brings together a number of critical stakeholders across the country that have different data sets. And the purpose of that session is to look at how can we address those barriers and really work together to paint this intelligence picture that will then really inform activity across the country. I think that's a really important next step because you're right, some of these barriers can easily be broken if we've got a common goal and a common objective to really maximise the use of that data to keep people safe.
Thank you. As I recall it very recently, the data trend is now for drugs tests to be slightly up, where there was a downward trend. Can I just ask who's engaged on the drugs death task force and any insight that you might give us at this stage, and maybe following up Angela's point that maybe we could look at this more closely through one of our committees? And I'm going to bring in Fiona McQueen after Beck Smith. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the question. A few kind of points to raise really, which might help. So, Angela, you raised the point about kind of intelligence, information, are we prepared, do we understand the profile and the issue, and I suppose there's a few things that I kind of wanted to draw out there which might reassure you in terms of the work that we do. So we know that drugs come in and are manufactured in Scotland and England and Wales, etc., or come in through our borders, and I suppose the most important thing to understand in terms of fighting against drugs is to know what's coming in, what's being manufactured, to be right ahead of the curve in terms of things like nitazines, etc., so we understand how we can react and prevent, more importantly, a public health issue or emergency as you outlined. We get a lot of that information from the National Crime Agency. We are linked into all of the national systems and processes within Scotland, but also wider in terms of the UK. The National Crime Agency has a really successful international liaison officer footprint, and particularly within areas with high drug production and shipping, and they are able to take those drugs away before they reach UK shores effectively. I previously in another life worked in that environment, so I have a really good understanding of that. One of your questions was around kind of prevalence in terms of particular drugs, etc., and understanding a little bit more about that. And actually, to Fiona's point as well, we do a lot of work around that in terms of sharing data. We're not there, and it's not perfect, and I think there's a lot more we can do in terms of bringing in a lot of those data sources. But one of the pieces of work that I'm keen to look at and think about how we might bring that in is the NCA ran a very successful wastewater testing pilot across the UK to understand the use and prevalence of certain drug types. And actually what it showed was that our data isn't as effective within policing and NHS sources as perhaps we might think, and drug use is perhaps more prevalent than we anticipate. So I would be keen to understand whether that's something that we could look at doing in Scotland. It would require a sort of multi-agency partnership approach. And that probably brings me on to one of my last points, really. This is something that we can't police our way out of, and I know we've talked a lot about prevention today, but my overriding thought around drug detection, we can do that, but actually this is about preventing, and this is about taking out some of our high-level dealers, our low-level dealers that we talked about in terms of the community, but it's about working with people who are affected by drugs and understanding how we can support them in the community. And that's something that we are absolutely committed to, and we want to do more. And that's our sort of work with the Scottish Drugs Task Force, the Drugs Desk Task Force, all sitting within the Policing Together Community Wellbeing Command. We're well linked in terms of that work. So there's a lot going on, and Chair, I'm really happy to kind of pick that up and have a bit more of a discussion at Performance Committee, or however you felt more appropriate, if that's something that the board would want.
Thank you. I think our officers will liaise about this, how we can best discuss this. I know you've been engaged in this. Fiona, tell us what your engagement has been. And
So I was Vice Chair of the Drugs Desk Task Force, which published Changing Lives in 2023, and the national mission, I think, as DCC Smith's already referred to, in terms of continuing on with that progress of how to go around reducing the tragedy of drugs deaths. And I think Angela's right, there's an opportunity here. There's no doubt that Police Scotland were a big part of the task force. I think the use of naloxone, the change to the public health approach, has made a significant difference to that. And I think it was maybe the Chief that talked about safer drug consumption that will be opening later on in the year. So again, another significant point in some of the actions that were taken, but probably worth a relook in terms of there are things that don't need to change money, cost money, that would actually make a difference in terms of reduction of these deaths. And I think we could, as a significant public partner in all of this, continue with the momentum of having a relook and a refresh, and just make sure that where we have ability to put energy into this, then we could do that to and help reduce drugs deaths.
Thanks, Fiona. I think this wicked issue of private data, which is unshared but could be for public benefit, really has to be one of the strategic issues tackled over the next few years. The data is becoming enormous, and if we can apply some of the AI analysis methods to that, we can probably find insights generally in Scotland which are unavailable to us now. But without that shared data, we are all going to be much more in the dark than we need be. So I want to see more private data shared for public benefit. It's a critical public health issue, and I think it's a very progressive way of working if we can have the safeguards. Now, we're running out of time, so I don't want to... I would like, Fiona, you to just ask us a question about drug driving in the 6 months. I think that's quite important to get a public update from the Director.
Thank you very much indeed. And I did have another question about widening access, but the Director has already responded to that in terms of looking at apprenticeships, and I'm delighted to see that in terms of National Performance Framework, looking at reducing inequalities, reducing poverty by increasing access to higher level work and well-paid opportunities. So delighted to see that and look forward to hearing how that goes on. You talked in your report, Fiona, about outsourcing a variety of work so that you can continue with drug driving, with the testing that's required of that, but you also referred to the fact that the demand is higher than had been anticipated. I wonder if you can tell us how confident you are that where the time to reduce to 6 months by December, that you would be able to meet that time in all cases.
Thank you, Fiona. I think I have a high level of confidence within the laboratory in relation to the Section 5A cases, which are the more straightforward of the drug driving cases, because we have for several months now been internally working to the reduced statutory time limit time frame. So we have a good data set that allows me to give you that assurance that the risks of cases exceeding the statutory time limit is low from a laboratory perspective. We continue to work with colleagues in Police Scotland around the transfer of the samples from the divisions into forensic services. That's an area where we know we still need to make some improvement, and there's some really good examples of great work that's going on across the divisions and some improvement that we're seeing. And we've got a really good structure that's well established in the Operation Hitch Improvement Group to look at that, and that the quality of the data that we have and are able to share has improved radically over the last few years. So that's really supporting that improvement. We are looking at refreshing the Memorandum of Understanding that we have for the drug driving cases in particular. The timescales and the targets that are set out in that do need to be tightened to provide a greater level of assurance around the end-to-end process, the system timeliness, to make sure that we can achieve the 6-month statutory time limit. So I am confident. I think we've got good, well-established processes of working together. And if a sample comes in a bit later, then we always work to prioritise that, and we work with the Crown Office. So there's good collegiate working across the system to make sure that we minimise the risk of any cases not being able to proceed to prosecution. So I am very confident. There's still work to do, and we have the systems and processes and also the enthusiasm and motivation, I think, to really make sure that we crack that before we get to December.
Thanks very much, and the board will rely on the oversight of Paul's committee to actually test your level of confidence on this and ensure that we don't breach through the working relationships. None of the parties breach the expected reduction in timeline to bring cases to court from 12 months to 6 months in the near future. Now I'm going to ask you to let me move on to the next item of business here because of time, and that's item 8, the quarterly financial performance report. I'm going to start with yourself, Chief Executive.
Chair, if I may just say a few words, and it's really to help the board through this, because what we have is a report from the CFO, which is a point in time, it's been to Resources Committee, and then I'm sitting with a letter from the government that's putting new conditions in place. So I think in terms of dealing with it, I think Mr. Gray presents his report, and then I can give an update on what the conditions might be going forward, and we can then discuss it if that's okay.
Indeed, and the caveat always, and James Graves knows this better than anybody else, this is the first quarter report. It tells us less than any other quarter. So let's not spend too much time on here, but give us the general sense you have at the moment, where some of the risk might lie. I want to hear from the Chief Executive about this letter, and then any response you might have, and open it up. So as quickly as we can, James.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'll be brief because the report was looked at in detail last week at Resources Committee. There's one error in the cover paper. It does say Appendix B, which is the budget revisions, is here for approval today, but that was, as the Chair of the Resources Committee said earlier on, approved at Resources Committee last week. So turning to revenue first and looking at the dashboard in Appendix A, which is on slide 3. With regards to the revenue position, as you say, it is early in the year, and we are projecting forward for a 9-month period. But what we are projecting at the moment is, despite seeing a year-to-date underspend as at the end of June, and these numbers are a little bit out of date now just because of the timing of the committee, I've seen the numbers coming through for the end of July, and we are continuing to see a trend of an underspend. We are still forecasting that for the full year that we will be at a break-even position. The main reasons for the underspend in the year so far has been that, as has been discussed earlier on, we are under the overall number of budgeted police officers that was approved in the budget in March. A number of reasons around that, the main ones being the kind of stop-start nature of turning on and turning off recruitment. So that's something members may want to pick up on. But we did start this financial year below that 16,600. And as we've gone through the year and recruited, we've also seen a higher than forecast number of leavers, which just means it's taking longer to get up, which is what's driving that underspend across police officer costs. What we have done to manage some of that is the overtime budget has been increased. The overtime management group is still in place, so that is being actively managed. It's still being well controlled, but where there is a requirement for additional overtime to compensate for there being under the 16,600 officers, that is being progressed, and also progressing a number of staff roles that will allow police officers to be freed up from those duties to move into the front line to help support the overall position. So that's why the overall forecast position at present for revenue is that we will break even. The biggest uncertainty that we have on the revenue budget at this point in time is that the pay award for 24-25 has not yet been agreed, and that's something that we will continue to actively monitor and work with P&D on to make sure that we are making sure that we meet that requirement around break-even and a balanced budget, and that we aren't exceeding that. Picking up on capital briefly, again, the forecast for the full year is that we will spend the full allocation, as we have done in every year, over certainly the time I've been here. But what I would say is that we are under year to date. We are behind where we thought we would be at the end of June, and that has tracked into July. A number of measures have been taken to try and recover that situation. The Capital Investment Group has been meeting regularly to closely monitor spend to make sure that where there are blockages, whether that's around procurement processes or whatever else, that we're finding ways through that, but then also looking to put money into other areas to accelerate spend to make sure that we spend the full allocation in year, because it's absolutely needed. And again, this is a part of this issue around stop-start that I spoke about in revenue. We've experienced it in capital. We were in a position last year where we were spending very large amounts of capital throughout the year, and we had to put the brakes on. We had to tell business areas to stop spending before Christmas because we had over-allocated the budget and we had seen that spend come through. We subsequently, business areas stopped spending, they turned their attention away from it, and then we're back onto the, right, we've got money again now, you need to start spending. So we're seeing a bit of a sluggish start to picking that up, and it's just, again, reflective of the fact that we are in that year-to-year stop-start position. But as I say, with the measures in place, we are forecasting that we will break even for the full year. And then finally on reform, the year-to-date spend is slightly ahead of what was in the budget, but overall high levels of confidence that we will come in on budget on reform as well. So in summary, forecasting that we will deliver budget for revenue reform and capital at the end of the financial year. Thank you. Happy to take any questions.
Thanks very much, James. Did you want to come back? Okay. Somebody had a question? Grant, yeah?
It's not so much a question. It's more just to confirm that what James has mentioned has very much been the flavour of our discussions at Resources. We're concerned about the capital spend in the year to date being significantly less than compared with last year, as shown on slide 11, and particularly in areas like estates and digital, where there's quite a lead time into getting from deciding to spend in an area to go through procurement to get it actually delivered in year is quite a challenge. So as James was saying, the stop-start nature of this is not making it any easier, but we're very keen to see this focused and rolling on to looking at capital on a 5-yearly basis, I think will help hugely to avoid the impact of having the stop-start problem that we're experiencing to date. But that's certainly an area of focus for Resources. Thank you.
Thank you. I think the goal of having a 5-year capital programme with getting away from annuality would be fantastic. Actually, similarly in Resources. And on that annuality, I think Chris wants a question about police officer numbers.
Thank you, Chair. Yes. And James, thank you for the report. And you've touched on some of this in your opening remarks. I wanted to come back to the commitment that was obviously made by the Chief Constable earlier, welcome commitment, important commitment that was made by the Chief Constable earlier in response to the Vice Chair's question, and particularly to the kind of organisational and financial context that sits behind that you've referred to. So we have a situation where 87% costs, staff costs, we have the red line of a balanced budget, we have the challenge of annuality. So I wondered if you could offer some observations on how you align workforce planning and financial planning in that challenging context.
Yeah, thank you for the question. And this past 12 months, and it's probably been about 12 months since we were in this building discussing the budget in 23-24, where we were facing a forecast overspend of £19 million or so. From that, there was a group set up to look at, well, what do we do to manage that? How do we try to bring that 19 million back in to meet that red line of a balanced budget? And one of the measures that had to be taken, which went against the kind of principle of workforce planning and where we wanted to be on officer numbers, was to stop the probationer intake, the final probationer intake of 23-24, in order to allow us to make that financial contribution to balance last year's budget. Now, that was successfully delivered, but the consequences, the workforce consequences, and therefore the organisational delivery impact of that was that coming into this financial year in April, we were 200-300 officers behind where we should have been because of a tactical pause on recruitment on police officers in order to deliver last year's budget, because there is a constant stream of officers retiring, resigning, and our model is that we will bring in probationer intakes to match the officers that are leaving in order to maintain numbers at the level that we've determined are the numbers we want to have for the coming year. So just one intake being paused, and then unfortunately that coinciding with higher numbers of leavers because of some pension changes that have made it advantageous for certain officers to retire before what had traditionally been the 30 years, has meant that we need to recruit even more officers just to maintain where we wanted to get to. But coming into this financial year, we were already playing catch-up, and that's why you're hearing about a record number of probationers coming into the organisation this year, while still being under strength on the workforce. So that annuality and having to look at 1 year and deliver a budget in 1 year isolation, and the measures you have to take to do that, which particularly in policing, where 87%, as you say, of our budget is workforce, we're incredibly sensitive around workforce impacts of having to make changes in order to balance a budget, which is obviously going to be around stopping probationer intakes, putting a freeze on recruitment and those types of measures, which we're also seeing underspends on police staff because of that impact, again, of stopping recruitment, and then, you know, you're trying to get back into it, and people, resources are diverted into other areas in order to manage with less people in the team, and then you're trying to resource back up. So there's a whole load of organisational pain that is a consequence of having to deliver against an annualised financial position and not being able to look at it over a multi-year period. And again, that's the key reason why we are under the 16,000, kind of 500, 600 at the moment. Thank you.
Chief Constable, you wanted to come in?
Thank you, Chair. Just to add to that, if I can. So we've talked a couple of times this morning around strengthening the front line. And that's absolutely my commitment, both to the broader communities across Scotland, but to the workforce and those individuals who, as our police officer numbers reduced through the back end of the last financial year for the reasons that Mr. Gray said, you know, bore the brunt of this. We've also talked today around two areas of business that pull away a great amount of capacity in frontline policing, that being supporting people with mental health and the positive progress we're making there with partners, but also the need around criminal justice reform, and particularly in terms of what I would describe as a dialing down of the court loading. In addition to that, in all of the governance and control and absolute focus around these areas of workforce and money, is an ambition on my part that in strengthening that front line, we do slightly reshape the organisation and bring police staff into roles which I would be accustomed to being taken, delivered by police staff, and we put those officers and those individuals in our organisation who are warranted officers into the front line of policing, so that they can use those powers. That, in due course, over a number of years, will be a shift of balance. It creates opportunities. Fiona talked there around modern day apprenticeships. That's probably something that we need to explore more of. So it will be a reshaping of the overall, the totality of the 22,000 people that do their best every single day to keep the people of Scotland safe. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I know I want to get through, not get through, but hear from the Chief Executive from the letter from the CABSEC. If you wouldn't mind going on to that now.
Thank you, Chair. The letter came in late afternoon. It was addressed to yourself as the SPA Chair and to myself as the AO. I've made that available now to Chief Constable, to DCC Connors, the CFO, and to Grant McRae, Chair of the Resources Committee, and I will circulate to all board members. It is quite brief. It is definitely focused on, it refers to the financial position being challenging, particularly in light of the pressures in pay. Therefore, the government are wanting to see action being taken. First 2 points, I think, are probably general to all organisations, which is to continue to ensure that discretionary spend is tightly controlled and the AO template, where 1 million approval is sought, remains in place. They also go on to say that where there are underspends, they expect them to be used for the wider financial position rather than repurposed for new work. And then in particular, I think there's a particular reference for Police Scotland. That is that they are saying that there's going to be controls around discretionary spend. However, the controls would exclude, for example, police officers where there's the agreed plan to get back to the 16,500, 600, control room staff, forensic staff and other critical posts without which the organisation couldn't operate effectively. And then they go on to stress again around non-essential spend around travel, hospitality and events. So that is the background. My suggestion is that we need to consider what that means going forward, and obviously Resources Committee will be fully on top of that. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Thank you very much, Chief Executive, for that heads up. We'll all receive a copy, and then I will be discussing this internally and then with the Chief Constable about how we apply this. Thank you very much. Are there any other questions on this item? Let me just get back to the big picture for James Gray. First quarter, so you can't tell everything from it, but you're confident about the red line that I and the Chief Constable have about a balanced budget. We're confident that we're going to get nearer 16,500, maybe above that by the end of the calendar year. That our capital budget will be spent appropriately and not just mopped up at the end of the financial year. And our strategy must be to advocate, I think, much more clearly for an increased capital budget. We will not be able to improve the capacity and capability of our police service without a significantly improved capital budget. And secondly, when we come into our advocacy for revenue, I'd be wanting to try to find more than 1 year deal, so we can have a degree of certainty on the 1 year. But the quid pro quo, which we've discussed privately and publicly, is we are paid, we are financed for 16,600. We've heard the explanation about how difficult it is to land that on the head of a pin because of a variety of reasons. But we've had the assurance we're going to get very close to it, and I think we're going to keep on coming back to that at the board, and I know Grant and his committee will come back to that on a regular basis. So thank you for the presentation of the report. I think that's us concluded for our public session. Could I just ask you to stay where you are? We have one item of the private session.